It is.
So,
it really is.
But so to wrap things up, because we've been going on for a really long time. The last thing I want to talk about here, when it comes to, kind of the second part of that question, when it comes to creators speaking out, do you feel that creators, and this is going to be kind of a loaded question to an extent, could be an easy question, I don't know, but do you feel like creators have a responsibility to cater their community, to respond to their community, to acknowledge things? Is there a responsibility? Because you look at a lot of these bigger creators, and I'm not going to say that community doesn't matter to people like Tim the Tatman, Ninja, it does. But it's a huge difference between someone like Ninja or Tim or Valkyrae responding to their community and engaging in their community than it is us. There's a vast difference in the number of people in those communities. Do someone like them have the same responsibility as someone like myself? Thank you so much for the subscription, by the way. But do you think that they have the same responsibility as us to respond to their community, to engage with their community, to formulate the community that they want to have? Their communities are massive, 1 million people, right? On Twitter and other avenues. Do they have the same responsibility that we have? Or do we have a responsibility and maybe we take it too seriously? Maybe we shouldn't have the responsibilities that we have. How do you guys feel about that?
Personally, I don't think, when it comes to stuff like this, I think there's the responsibility to discuss it responsibly. Not so much that there's the responsibility to address it in general, because I don't really think, like I said, like, you don't owe anybody your opinions. Like, nobody has that right to demand those opinions of you. So if that's something that the creator wants to address, I think their responsibility lies in approaching it in a responsible manner to encourage discussion if it's there, if it's something that they want to do, but it is absolutely not a necessity, I think. Because, I mean, yeah, like we said, like, I don't think that, anybody should be forced to talk about a topic if they don't want to, if they're not comfortable with it, if they don't feel educated enough on the topic. There's any number of reasons. If there's any number of reasons. Yeah, that's a big one. Like, there's topics that I'm not educated enough to speak on, and I'll show my support for, whatever cause, but that's as far as I can go and be like, yeah, from what I've read, this is what I support, but I'm not educated enough to actually really talk on that topic, but I'm willing to learn. But, if they don't feel like they're educated enough to really discuss and, like, dive into that topic, they don't need to be doing that, because that can only lead to misinformation. Because you're going to have information coming from a bunch of different sources. Like, everybody in your community, they're going to be on different sides of the fence. You don't know. You'll have some right wing, some left wing. Most likely, some people are only one or the other. That's fine. But you're going to have misinformation, because you're going to have information coming in from all these different sources. Kind of like we see on Twitter, where I saw a tweet earlier today that showed a video of a guy in an airport that was, like, throwing a fit, and it was actually tweeted with the tagline that he was a protester from the mob on Wednesday, and he's now on a no-fly list, and now he's upset. But that really wasn't the case. He was in trouble because he was refusing to wear a mask, but he wasn't necessarily on the no-fly list, and that's how misinformation gets spread, is people not understanding everything and then blasting it out. So if you're talking about something that you're not educated on with your community, and you don't know the whole story, you're going to spread that disinformation, and they're going to take that and run with it. So I think, out of anything, you have the responsibility to approach it responsibly, but not necessarily the responsibility to really approach the topic at all if you don't want to.
For me, it mostly comes down to and this is the I suppose this is the main difference between us and them, I guess. They're a brand. They're not just the person, they're a brand. They're a business. On top of it, we're just four people. And whilst they're just a person as well, they have so much more surrounding them. And a lot of the times you'll find that they're acting not out of personal interest, but out of just general interest. You know what I mean? It's not like you'll find, and there's kind of like cookie cutter responses. You see the stuff on Twitter, especially in streamer communities and stuff like that. And a lot of them do genuinely believe it as people, because I like to believe that a lot of them are very nice people. You know what I mean? But I like to have that belief that they're actually good. But I imagine quite a few of them wouldn't be putting their thoughts out there if they know, if they were like, well, this is going to look bad if I don't. And that's just the culture of it all. You know what I mean? As we discussed earlier. It's like, if I don't say anything, it's like, it looks bad on me. And whether that's, right or not is something that we discussed earlier on in the show. But to me, at least, it's less of a responsibility, morally speaking, and it's more of like, well, I've got a responsibility to protect what I've built here, and to do so, I need to put things out in a certain way, whether that be leaning in one way or another, as we've seen multiple times, And again, whilst I am sure there are plenty out there who speak for both reasons, and I imagine like a lot of people do. You're gonna find that there's many who'll just put something out there, so they've put something out there, and then they just move on and don't think about it again. It's like whether they should say something or not, I don't know. The way I always look at it is like, use your platform to not necessarily educate or spread a message, but kind of like set a standard that you want those following you to also like live up to, I guess, to an extent, for lack of a better way of phrasing it.
That makes sense. Curse, what about you?
It doesn't matter.
I don't
it doesn't matter.
Anything else to add on top of what these two have already said, because my view is basically exactly the same mixed together.
Yeah, for me, I feel like there's obviously, we're on the smaller end. I have double-digit views, and I rarely get those, right? There's a lot of people that get that 40 to 100 view range, some to the the 200 range. I think they are fostering genuine communities, and they have like a brand and a person, right? Like look at PAX South, right? I went to PAX South and I got fucking beers and drinks with Bloody Faster and company, right? That's not something that Tim the Tatman can go out and do.
That's the perfect like both that I was discussing.
Yeah.
Like where it's like it's like a gradient that kind of goes from one to the other, you know what I mean? And you kind of fade more and more into it.
We're out trying to establish brands. We have a bit more freedom to talk about it, but what really is us talking about it doing in terms of speaking to a community, right? Well, if I'm talking about, I'm basically just expressing my public opinion, right? It's not really to coerce a community of people to follow me. I'm the follower in most cases. I would love to be the leader, but right now I'm the follower in most cases. So I'm just expressing the opinions that I would like other people to follow, and I want to find other creators that have like-minded opinions for me to build a bond with. These other creators...
A good point you mentioned there, actually, was that you sort of like, that we're doing this and we're trying to build up brands. Because of the way we do things, if we were to ever get to that point, we've got a precedent of discussing these things in an open manner. We've kind of like interwoven that with what we do, and once we all do our own separate things, which none of which really relate to any of the stuff we discuss on this show. Let's be real. Like outside of the stuff we do as in the Fireside Chats, we all do our own things, but because we have this part as we're building things up, we are gonna we would get to a point where it's like, well, it is both, because we've demonstrated that even at the lower levels that we're perfectly okay with talking about things and discussing things in such a manner, and it's, I don't know, it's gonna kind of grow and become part of it with us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's kind of the big thing for us, is we kind of have that luxury growing as we are, and I think you see a lot of creators that have grown up recently that have that same mentality. One of our friends of the podcast, Third Artifact, perfect example of someone that established early on that she was going to talk about these things. And she was going to be open and honest with her community about issues and events going on. And has carried that through to her partner. Another person that I've recently been following is The Tune. Same exact way. Has already established that he has time set aside in every single stream to talk about current events. Talk with his chat. Communicate with his Discord. He's got that precedent set already that he's going to communicate with his community about things. Cooley, that we've had on this show, is someone who has established the precedent that she is going to talk to her community about these things. You see big creators that have started to do this. Markiplier, Ethan from Crank Gameplays. These people who have now established themselves, they're still talking to the communities about these things. Right? I mean, you've had big creators that are really putting the necks up going, look, if you support this, I don't want you in this community. You're going to make my community unsafe. My community is a safe space for these people, these people, these people. If you're not in that, if you're going to threaten them, you're not invited. And that takes a lot of balls, and that takes a early precedent that is set.
You can always look at it from the business side, but when you get to such a scale, like your Markipliers and stuff, you're looking at it and it's like, you'd honestly, business-wise, you'd probably be better off not saying anything sometimes. But it's nice that you do, you know what I mean? It's good that you do. And it's almost like it loops back around on itself, where you become so big that it doesn't matter anymore, where it's like, I'm just going to say what I want to say and I don't give a shit about what's good for my image or my brand,
I think it means something a little bit more to because here's the thing. You have to look at, and this goes back to a conversation we've had in past podcasts about celebrity status online, right? The people have this online celebrity status to communities that live online, like ourselves, right? Like people like Markiplier, they're not a celebrity to my father. They're not a celebrity to my mother, my aunt. They're not a celebrity to them because they don't live in the online world like we do. To us, he's the celebrity, right? And so I feel like a lot of these online creators, and I feel like it is some pressure from within the online content creation community. There is a lot of pressure on these guys to go, look, what's more important? The people, the other content creators in your community, or your money, your bottom dollar? And we've seen time and time again, these bigger creators that choose their bottom dollar, they end up losing more in the end by not saying anything. Because then as soon as they fuck up, everyone blows out of proportion and they've got no one there to defend them.
Yeah.
Beautiful example, Tobuscus.
Yeah.
We've mentioned him on the podcast before. He never talked about anything about it. He never said anything. He was a character and it was nothing else outside of that. The moment he had trauma, the moment he had drama, there was no one there to defend him. Because the only Tobuscus you knew was the character.
Yeah.
And I think that is something to keep in mind. And a lot of these content creators, they have that divide. There is a difference between Yellow Spoon Girl and Bella. There's a difference there, and you can see when that difference becomes clear. I feel like there's a difference between Markiplier and Mark Fishbach. Crank Gameplays and Ethan Nestor. There is a clear, distinct difference between them, and that gives them the ability to talk about things in a much more free manner.
I mean, Christ, even on the small scale, when you look at creators, I'd say I'm very different on YouTube than I am to Twitch. You know, like,
yeah.
I'd say I'm very. I think I'm very different on stream than I am on Twitter.
Yeah,
Twitter is me. Stream's no matter.
You're just the memes everywhere.
I'm just the memes everywhere. Memes.
But yeah, like, me on Twitter and stream, I'm far different than I am in videos that I've produced. But yeah, it's But yeah, it's nice to see, especially on the bigger end of things, where they do get to the point where they're just like, I'm just gonna fucking say what I want. I don't give a shit anymore. And maybe it's like starting like a ripple effect that we might see a lot more. You know, it might become a lot more obvious that this is something that's just going to happen from now on. You know, where they almost essentially break the fourth wall of what they're usually like. You know. Because as you're mentioning, like a difference between Grand Gameplays and like Ethan or Mark and Mark Fishback, you know, you see that both in the same place as well. You know, there'll be videos where he's like, "Yeah, I'm not in my usual like self on this channel. I'm just going to talk to you for a bit," you know.
Yeah,
and it's like the lines are getting blurred a lot more, and it's something I reckon we're going to start seeing a lot more, just across the board, where like people are like, "Yeah, no, I'm." This isn't this. This is me. I'm gonna talk to you right now, you know. And I think, and who knows, that might be like this podcast might be like a weird subliminal like result of that, you know, where we all subconsciously come to this conclusion based on what we're seeing around us, you know, because stuff like that happens all the time, you know, where it's like you see something around you and then it happens, you don't even realize you're doing it.
So like when you buy a new car and suddenly you see that car just everywhere, all over the road.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, I don't remember seeing this many Mini Coopers on the road, particularly white ones with black racing stripes, but here we are.
And we're going to be talking about this a little bit more as this year goes along. As the guests come on here, I do want to ask them that question.
As the New Game Plus continues.
As 2020 New Game Plus continues, we're going to be continuing these conversations because I really want to get into the mindset of a lot of these creators. Like, how do they look at building their communities? How do they look at creating their brands? And how do they establish themselves between someone who could be, you know, do you view yourself as nothing more than a brand? How do you differentiate between the brand and you? And keep yourself level and keep your community humble. Keep your community a safe place for the people that you want in your community, regardless of what type of people you want there. How do you create that safe space? While also making sure you can do this long term. Because I feel like the ones that do this long term, and this is their jobs, it is a balance you have to find. How loud do you get? When do you get that loud? And I think that's something that I really want to talk to some people about. I would love to hear your guys' opinions, even if you're a smaller creator, even if you've never been a creator, you're just a viewer. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on that. Let me know on Twitter, on Discord. We'll follow up on this as we go. But that is going to be how we end tonight. Again, we're going to be doing this podcast every other week, every other Sunday. It is going to be countercurrent with Vivid's D&D session.